Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Charlie Dixon. My guest today is Dr. Ishan Shivanand. Ishan is a distinguished mental health researcher and professor specializing in non-pharmaceutical, non-invasive, meditative modalities. As the founder of Yoga of Immortals programs, also known as YOI, Ishan has developed innovative wellness initiatives tailored to diverse demographics, including youth, professionals, athletes, and military personnel. Rooted in ancient yogic wisdom and healing sciences of India, YOI protocols encompass breathwork, yogic techniques, and cognitive stimulation to combat stress, burnout, and promote mental resilience. With scientifically proven results demonstrating significant improvements in anxiety, depression, and insomnia, Ishan's programs have impacted over 1 million participants worldwide and garnered integration into numerous governmental, healthcare, and corporate institutions. We're excited to have Ishan with us today to discuss Yoga of Immortals, his resilience training programs, and exploring this concept he calls restful alertness. Thank you so much for coming to the show, Ishan.
Thank you so very much. Pleasure's all mine to be here.
Absolutely. So, as we get started today, can you elaborate on the concept of Yoga of Immortals and its mission to impart mental resilience training using ancient native medicine techniques?
The concept is that the power lies within us. So, whenever we are looking at mental health, then the resources that we can bring in our lives can be of an internal nature or an external nature. The external nature could be relying upon pharmaceutical interventions, etc. And the internal natures would be when we focus upon meditative protocols, when we try to awaken our own potential as well as know thyself. That is the core concept. The more we know about us, the more we are aware about our own personality, about our own self, the more we will be able to understand the tools that are provided in the set program to help us in the time of crisis.
So, how do these techniques differ from any other form of yoga that one might practice?
So, in the West, yoga is seen as a fitness tool as well as other benefits as well. So, generally, when we'll go to a gym, you'll find a yoga protocol there, and all these protocols heavily focus upon the physiological benefit that we can derive from yoga, which is great. But when we look at the concept of yoga and the ancient traditions from which it originates, then the main focus of yoga was the cognitive aspect more than the physiological aspect. So when we focus on Yoga of Immortals, we are trying to rely on a much more deeper spiritual concept, a holistic concept, and a cognitive concept, so that a person who has limitations, because if we just rely upon physiological yogic concepts, then people have limitations. Some person may not be able to do all those stretches that they are being done in the gym, or some person will not have the health ratios that they can apply on the set programs. But the thing with Yoga of Immortals is anybody can do that. Anybody can sit in a corner, take a deep dive inside, and utilize these tools that are at hand.
Got you. Thank you for digging into that because that was going to be my main question. I've practiced a little bit of yoga, but mainly for the health benefits, the physical benefits. Many years ago, took a break from it and came back, and my body does not do the same thing physically that it used to. So it's refreshing to know that this goes a bit deeper than just what your physical body can do. So speaking of that, can you share with us the inspiration behind creating this evidence-based mental wellness program?
Ma'am, the evidence was COVID, because during the time of COVID, we were trying to plan a research, and actually, the research was planned just before COVID, March of 2020, and we were looking for research subjects. And when the execution of the said research happened, COVID hit. So our expectation was that if we can have, let's say, 500 people, or just in that ball group, if we had 100, we would be very happy. 500, our mind would have been blown. So then we will have a research group, a control group, etc. But then when COVID hit, suddenly people became extremely aware of their own mental health, because COVID
Mhm.
made people pause. People had the time to look at their lives and think, what is it that we want? Where is it that we are going? And all the mental health garbage that we had just been pushing under a rug came in front of us. And we ended up having almost 10,000 participants. And in that time frame, we got to know people better. And the demographic of the people that attended was, the age group was around, most of the people were around from the age group of 18 to 35. There were an equilibrium of 50% male, 50% female. And then from a variety of socioeconomic aspects, we were able to talk with people, converse with them, and we understood that not a lot of focus is being put on mental health. Everybody is going through some form of mental health issue, and the hustle culture that we live in,
Mhm.
it's understood. So people say, yeah, anxiety, it's a part of life. Stress, it's a part of life. It's like saying you're shot with an arrow and walking with an arrow in your shoulder is a part of life. It's not. We have made stress and anxiety normal. We have made burnout normal. And that is where there was a need I saw, that we need to help integrate the modalities that can help us deal with these mental health crises that we face on a day to day basis. And that was the inspiration.
Gotcha. And so, taking a step back, Dr. Ishan, can you tell us a little bit more about you, where you received your yogic training? Tell us more about you.
So, ma'am, I was born in a monastery in India, in the western part of India, in Rajasthan. So, the life that I lived was a very yogic life, where holistic health was part of the day to day activity. I stayed in the monastery for the first 20 years of my life. That is where I got the training in the most traditional and ancient aspects as you can think of. And it was a very beautiful environment, but I really did not value the training that I got in the monastery, because I did not have any scope of comparison. At the age of 20, I had a desire that I wanted to see more of the world, and I wanted to come out of the monastery, and I wanted to have a family life. I wanted to be a householder. I wanted to work and just see what the world was. And when I got out into the world, I realized that the core competency that I developed, it is the need of the hour, because every single person, no matter who they are, a student, a physician, a soldier, a housewife, a mother, anybody needs these tools. So I spent a lot of time teaching first what I'd learned in the monastery, but then I realized that I cannot just hope people to live the life that I was living in the monastery. Because imagine if I go to a doctor and I say, get up 4 a.m. in the morning and then spend 5 hours on your own mental health through meditation, yoga, and then eat a certain kind of diet. That just doesn't happen. So I needed to translate those ancient teachings in a contemporary fashion. So in 2015, I started to partnership with research institutions and governments, where I would then take the protocols that I had learned and I would implement it in different scenarios and see what was the best result
Mm.
that was procured. And then the evidence based protocols we would implement again in certain scenarios that would benefit those people. For example, students, HCPs, HCWs, etc. And then in 2019, I moved my base to the United States of America. And since then, I have been researching and implementing as well as developing those ancient teachings to transform them on a contemporary model.
Nice. I really appreciate that you're able to take your modality and almost tailor it to each set of people, or each group of individuals. So how does that really work? What are some of the key techniques that you employ to enhance the mental wellness and really reduce those symptoms of stress, anxiety, and depression? Because you're right, we are kind of conditioned to believe that those symptoms are normal and that everybody has them and that we're supposed to have them. So how do we get out of those?
So I will not take a lot of credit for it, because in the ancient times, certain yogic modalities were developed for certain types of people based upon what was the work they were doing in life. When we think yoga, we think of a blanket term,
Yeah.
and it's so very generic. But when we go deeper into the study, the discipline, we find that there are disciplines like Raj Yoga, King's Yoga. So people who are dealing with the day-to-day professional power that is bestowed upon them, like CEOs, etc., managers. So the modalities are different than there were modalities that were given to soldiers. One of the great epics in India is the Mahabharata, out of which Gita is seen to be taught in a lot of Western universities that I did get the chance to teach at. And in Gita itself, the discourse is to a soldier that before war is having jitters, a panic attack. So then the yoga, the cognitive yoga, is given to him, a discipline that can help him uh, combat whatever the issues that he's facing, so he could perform his duty. So the work has been done thousands of years ago, because civilization works in interesting ways. There are some universal truths that we discover, then we forget, then we rediscover, and we implement. So I take my inspiration heavily from IKSs, which are the Indian knowledge systems, and then I try to utilize them in the set scenarios. But I also have a team of doctors, psychiatrists, and researchers that are working with me, that help me. So how it generally works is, we have a pre-survey, we do a pre-research on the group that we are going to work with, and then the protocol that is best suited to their needs, we implement it. And then we do a post survey, we do the post research to see what is the change, the deviation in their mental health data. And then we do constant follow-ups and constant tweaks to the program. And after a few months to a year, then we have something concrete, tangible in our hand, that we can then implement in a blanket fashion in universities or institutions. But it takes a lot of research and hard work to implement something like this.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Whether you're a longtime or first-time listener to Behavioral Health Today, you're probably familiar with Triad, the company that brings you this podcast. But you may not know that Triad also hosts a community for current and aspiring behavioral and mental health professionals, featuring trending content and education and career resources, all for free. If you are a behavioral or mental health professional, or you're studying to become one, join more than 80,000 people on Triad by claiming your free professional account today. Visit us at hellotriad.com/BHT. That's hellotriad.com/BHT, and join the Triad community today.
Nice. I'm really intrigued by the interdisciplinary approach that YOI has. I don't know that I know many other modalities that combine an ancient wisdom, so to speak, with a modern scientific research. It's really interesting to me. Can you shed some more light on how these traditional mental health protocols are designed, researched, and implemented by other healthcare professionals?
So we have to understand that many times any healthcare professional is looking at providing benefit to themselves and to the patients. So there are factors like the economic cost of healthcare. So healthcare institutions and professionals are always looking that how we can cut down on that cost so that we can get a bang for the buck. And we have seen that when we have an integrative approach towards health, and when I say integrative, I don't just mean the nutraceutical approach where we are relying upon nutraceuticals combined with the therapeutic processes that are being given, but some form of lifestyle behavioral modification as well. So the healthcare professionals see that the cost of healthcare comes down, the way the body responds to the therapeutic processes that are being given, it responds in a much more better manner, in a much more powerful manner. Whereas earlier, a person may not be responding to the therapy. Now, after this integrative healthcare, the response becomes better. And the rehabilitative process becomes much better. So when an HCP or HCW sees that there are so many benefits, then nowadays there is a renaissance that is going on in the medical field, whereas health is not just seen as a physiological concept, but a whole holistic approach, a mind body approach is being taken by the doctors who care. So they want something that can not just heal the body, but heal the mind as well. I will give you an example. I was working with MD Anderson with a cancer survivorship program, and physicians are understanding that there is a toll on the mental health once a disease is diagnosed, and there is a toll even after cancer remission happens. There's always this fear that what if the thing comes back? How will I deal with it? There is always a very conscious awareness of one's mortality. So at that times, if such tools are not given, then a person can spiral down into mental health issues. So a holistic approach is being evaluated, is being explored, and thankfully it is being implemented nowadays.
That is
So
awesome.
the response has been extremely positive, and that's good for all of us.
It definitely is, because too many times it is just a focus on, like you mentioned before, just taking a medication or just maybe even doing something, some physical weight loss or something like that, those more simple types of things. And so being able to look at a whole person or look at things more holistically can definitely improve outcomes for everyone. Speaking of your research findings, I've been taking a look at the YOI website, and the research findings are quite impressive. I will take a second to read them to our listeners. A 72% decrease in depression symptoms, a 75% decrease in anxiety symptoms, an 82% decrease in insomnia symptoms, and 77% improvement in the quality of life. Those are beyond impressive. And so showing these significant decreases in depression, anxiety, and insomnia symptoms, how do these outcomes translate into real life improvement? So you mentioned that this research kind of started out of COVID and you had lots of participants. Can you talk to us more about what that looked like for the participants?
So the graph of mental health from COVID has generally gone down, and our participants showed promising improvement in their mental health where the world was going through a crisis. So, generally, the conversation around mental health was that if you want your mental health to be better, go take walks on the beach, have a better social circle,
Mhm.
go to the gym. It always becomes that my meditation is going to the gym, go to the
Yep.
gym, and then the trouble was that during COVID you could not do anything like that, and the only thing you had was your own body and your own mind. And the thing about the mind and the body is it's a leveling field for all of us. A person may or may not go to the gym, a person may or may not have access to the beach, a person may or may not have friends, because we live a very isolated lifestyle in this
Mhm.
century and time, and the only thing sometimes we do have is us. So we had the ability to work with us during that time period. And how the results of the practice translates into everyday life is, if we look at insomnia, it can be caused as so many physiological disorders that can come in the long run. If we look at anxiety, it can cause us to have so many intrapersonal and interpersonal issues, and it can affect our cardiovascular, our mental health, our physiological health as well, remaining in a constant state of anxiety. And then the ill effects of depression, they are too immense to elaborate right now. So imagine if we had something, a practice that did not make us rely on any external factor, that did not require any form of resource exhaustion from our end, and that could help us in all these various aspects of our life, then how phenomenal it would be for our quality of life. And that's what it showed in that research finding when we were studying the quality of life, because during COVID we were in our house, with our families. We had nothing to do. We had no outward joy that we could provide to ourselves. But at that time, we were able to raise the quality of life. And that just teaches us. It's just a very philosophical finding that happiness comes from within. It's all a game of the mind. And if you are not happy from inside, then no matter what you have will never be enough. So journey begins from us.
Absolutely. And it really does take us back to something you said earlier is the power is within us and it really is about knowing yourself. Oh, that's amazing. So again, taking a look at your website, there's a particular focus on a program for reducing burnout and promoting resilience among healthcare workers. So can you talk us through that process of resilience training models for healthcare workers? And is there a different type of protocol or a different modality used across the country or globally in different areas based on where they are?
So the need for HCPs I understood was when I was working with Hospice of Cincinnati. And these were the workers, again, we go back to the COVID time, they were going through a lot of pressure because at end of life care, family plays a very crucial role. And because of COVID, there were some policies that were made in certain parts of the country where the family was not part of the end of life process. And it was the healthcare worker that had to take care of the person who was transitioning from life. And because of this transition, because of this work, I saw that a lot of healthcare workers were complaining that they are carrying a residue with them. So even after they've done their work, when they go back home, they are not feeling the same. It was a invisible baggage that they are carrying in their hearts and their mind, and it was affecting everything that they are doing. So at that time, we started to explore that what are the modalities that we can implement, integrate in their daily practice so that they can provide the care to the patients, but there is some form of care that they can provide to themselves as well. And it is from there we started to implement the programs from hospice, and then it went towards cancer HCPs, HCWs, and then a plethora of healthcare workers. We have helped them implement, and not just the workers itself, but even the students that were studying, because when it comes to residency, the students are so very overworked, and they have one of the highest rates of burnouts in the world. And imagine if all the medical students start to get burned out, then what will happen 10 years from now? That
Right.
is something that is extremely serious in nature. The need for doctors, trained doctors, is just going to increase more and more the way the world is moving. And we have to provide them with the tools that can help themselves, and we have to provide them the training that can help themselves. Because think of it in this manner: when you go to a construction site, people are wearing steel toe shoes and hard hats because people are much aware of the hazards that come in a construction site. And if we look at healthcare professions, if we look at surgeons, if we look at doctors, and we look at the stress levels, and we look at the anxiety levels, and we look at the burnout levels, now there is a direct correlation that when you go to this field, these are the mental health challenges that you are going to face. And we have to think to ourselves, we are providing hard hats to a person working in construction because we know there is a hazard, but what are the tools we are providing to the healthcare worker, whereas we know now definitely these are the mental health challenges. And that's where I have a hope that we can make these tools as part of their training, so that whenever they find themselves in a state of crisis, they have at least the tools of self awareness, self modulation, and self healing practices.
Awesome. And I was going to ask you about any challenges that you saw in integrating ancient native medicine techniques, but it seems like you've already told us that you are working to combat burnout and resilience by teaching people to look within again and focus on themselves, and being able to take care of themselves first, really, and then move to working with their clients or their patients.
So, challenges may come if I call these modalities as a replacement therapy.
Mm.
for pharmaceutical approach or with any modern medical approach. But I never say that it is not a replacement therapy. It is an integrative therapy that complements and supplements the therapy processes that are already being provided, because our objective is to provide the best care for the patient as well as the
Mhm.
best care for the healthcare professional. So we explore all integrative modalities so that we can have a holistic picture. So there are no challenges when our approach is in this manner.
Nice. So then, what do you say to naysayers against the power of this type of non-traditional medicine or an approach to non-traditional medicine, such as YY? What do you say to them?
Depends on who the naysayers are. If that is the scientific community, I point them to the research. I
Mhm.
invite them to collaborate, and that generally overcomes the block wherever it is. Or the naysayers could be the patients, and then again, we ask them to integrate it into their practice, and when they see the benefits, that's where we see how they can approach it in their lives. And one of the key factors that we see in our research is compliance. So
Mm.
generally when we are doing any form of research, there has to be compliance, and to increase that compliance, uh, monetary incentive is provided or some other type of incentive is provided. When we were doing the Yoga of Immortal research protocols, we did not provide any form of incentive, and we had almost a 95% compliance rate, which is unheard of. And
Mhm.
why is it that people were compliant to the research? Because they were benefiting. They found themselves being helped. And if something helps people, then they come back. And then if the naysayers are just people who like to naysay, then I just say to each his own. And I'm happy that you don't like this, but I hope that you find something that you do like, because eventually your tail is going to be on fire. And if at that time you don't have any water, then your ass is
Mhm.
cooked.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Broken down in the simplest terms, really. Because if you don't already have something to use, something to fall back on, that is absolutely what happens. I want
Yes.
to go back to something that we discussed earlier and didn't really get a chance to dig into. You mentioned that being able to have someone sit in a corner and kind of sit with themselves. What would you call that practice? I read through your website and I saw something mentioning restful alertness. Can you tell us what that is? What do practitioners of YOI aim to achieve with it? And then how does that serve to as like an antidote for stress?
Yes, ma'am. So we can call it a meditation practice, we can call it a contemplation practice, we can call it restful alertness, we can call it yoga nidra. And it is just allowing ourselves to come in the present. And the objective here is to break this disconnection that we are feeling. It's a type of disassociative disorder that I see a lot of people suffering from, where they are there but they are not there.
Mhm.
They are just going through lives in a robotic fashion, and they can be with their family but they are not actually there. They can be in a movie but they are not actually there. And this form of disassociative disorder, as it prolongs, it can have a lot of detrimental impact on our mental health. So when we practice something like meditation or restful alertness or yoga nidra, what we are trying to do is bring our awareness back, bring a connection with our body, a connection with our mind. And we've seen when there is a better mind body connection, when there is a better connection with the self, we become much more alert on how we treat ourselves, on what kind of lifestyle we have, because all of this practice is a form of self love. And how can we love ourselves if we don't know ourselves, if we do not feel connected to ourselves? And the moment this connection is made, the self love starts to go through the roof, and we see slowly the changes people automatically start to make in their lives that will benefit them. And that is where these practices come into play.
Okay. So, can you share with us a success story of someone you work with that utilized your YOI program? And what was that experience like? What did success look like?
So, one testimonial that comes into mind right now would be of a soldier that I was working with, and the soldier was suffering from PTSD through all the experience that he had to partake in protecting his country. And what would happen with him was that he would have these triggers that would just make him black out. And in that state, when he would be blacked out, he would do things on which he had no control of, and he would be extremely guilty and shameful about them when he would come out of that episode. So after we had worked for 3 to 6 months, he came to me and he told me that I am so very grateful, because earlier when that blackout would come, and he would always refer to it as a third party, as something like a demon that had power over him and he had no power over it. And he said, earlier when that thing would be coming towards me, I was powerless, I was unaware, and it would catch me off guard. And he said that now, after these practices, there is so much self awareness that I can see it coming from far off. And what that does is, because I am aware and I can see it coming from far off, I can alert myself and start to make changes in my life so that that does not affect me. And second thing, how this practice has helped me is that earlier, even if I knew this was happening, I had no tools. I did not know what to do at that particular time that would help me. And now I have these tools to rely upon. So whenever I see something like that happening, I can utilize that tool and I can prevent that episode from happening. And we've always heard prevention is better than cure. And that was his experience, which I really found phenomenal. And the same can be implemented in a variety of professionals' lives.
Nice. One of the things that you mentioned is just now that it can be implemented in a variety of professionals' lives. But one profession that I did not necessarily hear mentioned was educators. So my current profession is as a school social worker, and so I'm curious if it can be or how it can be used with educators, because much like healthcare workers after COVID, our lives are much more hectic, to say the least. Children are different, students are different, parents are different, the system itself is different. And so are there future goals or aspirations to dig into other professional categories? And can you tell me about those?
Definitely, madam, because I personally believe that educators are the one who are doing the actual national building. If we look at even parenting, if we look at a double income household, the real parenting work relies upon the educator. The dilemmas that the youth are facing, they all rely upon the educator, and it is the educator that prepares the youth for the life that they are going to live and the challenges that they are going to face. Where I come from, educator is taken and a very high stride. And I like to say a poem that was taught to us when we were children, and it was that Guru Gobindo khade kake lagu pai, Balihari Guru aapne Gobindiyo milai. And what this poem means is, if my guru, which is my educator, and my God is sitting in front of me, who will I bow down to first? And the answer is, I will bow down to my educator, because it is through his teaching, it is through his path that I found success, that I was able to merge with my divinity. So that is where educators are, from where I come from and how I see them. And it is very powerful. And we have had abilities and we have had some opportunities to work with educators, but not in North America. We have worked with educators in Mauritius, in Africa, in India, because the approach, the acceptance of holistic modalities is at a much higher rate. And we were able to implement them in universities that are dealing with STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and the understanding that how important these modalities are. But then it comes down to policymakers. So policymakers have to have that zeal, that love for the educators to implement these modalities, because we can't just go, because the school systems are very protected systems. Universities are very protective environments, and the policy makers play a key role. So even if an educator wants to do something, generally, usually, mostly their hands are tied until and unless a policy is provided to them. And I've seen that in Africa we have done phenomenal work, and we would be publishing the research as well. In a country like Mauritius, where the population is only 1 million, we were able to make very good impact, because almost a part of the country's education system, we were able to partner and collaborate with them. And the same goes for India. We were able to collaborate and partner with the top universities. But I really hope that we could do such things in North America. But policymakers, that is the hope, that is the dream. If they can understand this, then and it just takes one. It takes one good, compassionate policymaker that is willing to make a change, that is willing to provide resources, that is willing to go above and beyond the call of duty and help us pioneer something like this. And then generations of students would be thanking that policymaker. So if there's any policymaker hearing us, I hope they can help.
And I absolutely agree with you. The red tape to just make small changes is immense in education. So I agree with you that if there are any policymakers out there, and maybe I will start sharing when we publish, so we can get your message out to those making those policies. So are there any upcoming research projects or initiatives in the pipeline that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yes, ma'am. So presently, we are working with a few specialists, where we are working on body dysmorphia and how we can help children that are suffering from the said predicament through these protocols. We are doing research on hospice care workers and how these modalities can help them in the end of life care, as well as we have done some research, and we are waiting on the papers on how we can study the impact of these modalities on students that are on working on in high stress environment and in the field of STEM. So these are the projects that presently we are undertaking, and in the time to come, we will have something phenomenal to publish.
Nice. And I cannot wait to see the research and see the impact of your work grow. So I would love for our listeners to follow up with you and Yoga of Immortals and your other programs. Share with us some resources where our listeners can follow up with you.
I'm on LinkedIn under Ishan Shivanand, and there are a lot of resources on Google as well. So if they just Google Yoga of Immortals or my name, they'll find again a plethora of websites, of links that can direct them to the correct path. And I'm sure that we would be able to provide links of some meditations that we do on a in synchronous fashion online, where people can be part of it. It is free of cost, and it is where we focus on reversing burnout. So I saw the need that many times people need help, and they cannot just rely on their institution or their education body to provide them the resources. So I made these links free for all, available for all, where live I come and I teach them. I don't tell them the benefits of the resources, because the research and their own research can tell them. I just go there 1 hour, immediately we hit the runway in a high speed, and we start the processes. And it's a beautiful community. Thousands of people log in, and we do our processes. They feel their benefit, and they keep on returning back. So I would love if we can share that link and people can register. It is free of cost, but I think you may have to register to get the link, and be part of these sessions whenever you can.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, because I will definitely be joining in. Again, burnout is something that I think that a lot of us professionals experience, and finding a way to intrinsically work on that is incredibly important. Dr. Ishan, it has been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you speaking with us today.
Thank you, ma'am. The pleasure is all mine, and my regards to all your listeners.
Yes. And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. The resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.